James Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in Conservation Week, and we have become aware today that there is a new endangered species, dock rangers. Mr. Speaker, it's Conservation Week, and it's time that we acknowledge that the national government is not truly committed to conservation. We can see all too clearly that what national values is publicity and looking good and great announcements, but they do not care about action or results. Throughout its time in government, National has systematically underfunded the Department of Conservation, and this means that the Department of Conservation is not able to carry out its core functions, and it means that more species are at risk than ever before. This government makes a virtue out of its so-called commitment to conservation. It's announced with great fanfare the battle for the birds, predator-free 2050, and it's certainly happy to pay for the photo ops, but it's not happy to pay for those things itself. Behind all of that spin is the reality. Let's take a look at their so-called ambitious plan, the Apollo shot that they've set for New Zealand of becoming predator-free by 2050, a laudable goal. So ambitious, in fact, that the national government has given just $7 million a year for 4 years to pay for a mission that expires in 2050, a mission that has had an estimated cost of $9 billion. So you can see exactly how this government is committed to looking good, to making grand announcements with no substance, no plan to actually pay for it. That is typical for this government, cutting funding by a lot and then claiming a small increase back as some kind of massive win. Mr. Speaker, over the past 8 years, DOC has missed out on $368 million of funding, which is every year added together since National took office, adjusted for inflation. The 2016 budget was $40 million less, a cut of nearly 9% on the 2015 budget. Funding for native species, in fact, fell by $27 million, which is a 14% cut. Now, in 2015, that we are told that there were 833 dock rangers, and this year there are 788 dock rangers. And at that rate of decline, dock rangers themselves will become extinct in about a dozen years. The last dock ranger to be spotted in the wild will be somewhere around Christmas of 2027. Even today, there is only one ranger for every 35,000 acres of land that the department is responsible for. That's the equivalent of 16,380 rugby fields of conservation land for each dock ranger to cover. Mr. Speaker, we need to fund conservation properly. National is not doing this. Our species are more at risk than they have ever been before, and DOC is struggling to cover its core basic functions. In May this year, the Green Party asked the Minister of Conservation whether DOC was meeting its basic functions, and the answers showed the following. 46% of our DOC tracks are not up to standard. 25% of our huts are not up to standard. 7 huts have closed and have not reopened. 84 structures, including boardwalks for viewing platforms, fail barrier assessments. 167 fail load capacity assessments. 37 are listed as needing, quote, serious or critical work tasks outstanding, end quote. The Waikato Moana, one of my first great walks when I was an early teenager, listed multiple times for this. The same walk where 4 French tourists were violently thrown from a bridge where the cable snapped. Most critically, 142 species, including the kea, the flesh-footed shearwater and the wandering albatross, have had their threat status increased since this government came to office in 2008. Mr. Speaker, the Green Party knows that what conservation needs is action, not spin. It is time to change the government. In government, the Green Party would properly fund the Department of Conservation and support thousands of volunteers around the country who are doing great work. We would ensure that DOC at least has the funding to cover its basic functions. This government is failing on conservation. It is Conservation Week. The Minister of Conservation should restore the Department of Conservation's funding to at least the level that it was before her government came to office so that they can do some conservation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.